very brief summary of the book. Intimacy means we are together
because of it.
with nothing between us.
And there's no purpose. There's no ulterior
No agenda.
No agenda.
Not love, not sexual pleasure. We're together so that we have each other. And that can never be bad. That can never be bad. So just to make a joke about it, if you asked your grandmother, what happens in the bedroom? Your grandmother would say, nothing. And you say, come on.
I'm here. You're my grandmother. Something.
Tell me. She's telling you, in a bedroom there's no thing. It's just them. Them being together, with nothing coming between them. A bedroom is a no-thing zone. You leave all things in the living room. You don't bring them into the bedroom. Having each other, like Tevye's wife.
Do you give classes and
Yes.
lectures on this?
Endless.
Okay, so how do we get in touch? They could contact you through It's Good to Know Publishing or
It's good to
email?
know.org.
It's goodtoknow.org. Okay, Rabbi Manis Friedman, it's goodtoknow.org. It's good to know, so it's easy to remember. So it's good to know a lot of things, and I think something as practical as human relationships is something which everyone is needs or deserves.
So I think we need to change our title.
What?
Not it's good to know. You gotta know.
You got to know.
It's not just good, it's necessary.
You have to know. Otherwise,
You gotta know this. You gotta have intimacy. You have to. Otherwise, we're not human. Intimacy makes us human.
intimacy, and ultimately that in turn gives us the ability to express to further people. It doesn't. It's like someone who's rich and gives money, he doesn't become poor. On the contrary, he becomes richer.
How does a yeshiva boy, who all his life has been told, don't think about girls, don't think about sex, it's disgusting, it's animalistic, it's sinful, it's ugly, and then one day somebody says, okay, now get married, and it's wonderful. So wait, how did it suddenly become wonderful? What am I doing? And it's not just the yeshiva boy. Everybody has that problem.
Well, it's also about Hollywood is always portraying someone. They're painting things which are not real.
Yes. So how do you make that switch? It's disgusting up to the marriage. Once you get married, it's beautiful. If you do it this way, it's disgusting. If you do it that way, it's beautiful. How does that work? How does that work? The answer in the book, what you were told was disgusting will always be disgusting because it cheapens people. What you're going to have in marriage, nobody ever said that was disgusting. That's intimacy. And that doesn't need to be embellished. That doesn't need to be defended. It's pure holiness. So don't confuse the two. That's important because people get married and they don't know what they're doing. Like sometimes they feel guilty and sometimes they feel ugly. And
Maybe there should be there's a marriage a driving test. Should have like
So for example, people who live together and it's good, so they decide to get married. The divorce rate among them is higher than people who never live together. How does that make sense? It's because they think marriage is a continuation of what they had before. And it's not. What they had before had nothing holy about it. So if you're thinking, let's continue what we're doing, but with a chuppah, that's not. It's got to be a completely different experience. Something you never had before.
And that's what intimacy is about.
That's why we need the Torah to advise us and guide us and give us direction. To have sex, you don't need advice.
Yeah.
But for that to be intimate,
To become holy and to be special.
there you need some wisdom. you need some help. Not so simple. And it's very unfortunate that we don't talk about it.
It's a taboo because the people think that it's like the idea of mikveh that people never spoke about.
Yeah. We didn't speak about it glibly.
You're speaking of the...
But not to teach about it? Why is this mitzvah so unfortunate? It has no mazel. Every other mitzvah gets talked about and discussed and debated, and this is like nothing. It's a mitzvah.
It's the first mitzvah.
All the other mitzvahs depend on it.
Right. And the human race depends
Yes. So of course we should speak about it in a tznius fashion.
Right.
But not to speak, that does more harm than good. So the book may not be a traditional way of conveying this.
And this applies both
but it's
to both Jews and non-Jews.
Yes.
As universal
Yes.
people looking for more meaningful, other than having the
So mikveh may not apply to everybody.
No, mikveh, but certain of having the intimacy or the...
And the concept of taharas hamishpacha is a much bigger subject than the mikveh itself.
Right.
The mikveh is a tool for taharas hamishpacha. But taharas hamishpacha really means a healthy relationship that uplifts you, not that degrades you.
And this is a universal message, and I want to thank you for your time and for your wisdom. And this is hopefully this is a time when we're living in Mashiach times, where this wisdom and joy will permeate the entire world. And
Amen.
We as Kohanim will serve together as not ambassadors, but as priests.
Public servants.
Public servants will serve.
Yes.
And let's hope that it happens today in Yeshua.
Amen.
And the world comes to fruition, because this is about a process which began with the creation of Adam and Eve.
Yep.
And we're just one time zone, going back to. So hopefully that should happen today, and we should all these tools. I think utilizing the media is a very powerful.
Yes.
Whereas 100 years ago, a rabbi such as yourself with a long white beard, they would say, "Oh, he doesn't know about anything about intimacy or about." They would sort of paint a certain. But in the contrary, you have more wisdom and insight than in this one little book. You have more wisdom and insight with the long white beard. Baruch Hashem. I want to thank you.
It turns out our grandparents really did know a lot.
And they survived much greater challenges.
Yep. With wisdom.
With wisdom.
Yep.
And they made do with a lot less. And they were happy with a lot less. And they had a lot more trials and tribulations.
But they had each other.
Right.
They really had each other.
Yeah. Today, someone that doesn't have his coffee is all. His coffee's too cold. I mean, they didn't have coffee.
Grounds for divorce.
They didn't have anything. Right. People went to wars. They went to. Anyways, but thank God we don't have that, and thank God we're living in a time where the challenge is more mental.
So great success with your show.
And thank you for coming on. And again, those who want to contact Rabbi Friedman, it's Good to Know Publishing, and his book. He's always available to speak and to sign your book. I'm sure you could have a book signing also.
Yeah, I gotta do that too.
Yeah, and the main thing is to find out, because it's like you say, you have to know. You got to know. And Mitzvah Hashem, we should see where everyone knows, the whole world knows.
You're watching the Torah Learning Channel. Welcome back to another episode of Kabbalah 101. Become a masterpiece of creation by studying the Torah here on the Torah Learning Channel. You can find us at TorahLearningChannel.com.
Hashem yishmerecha, Yor Hashem panav, Yor Hashem panav, v'lecha v'chunecha. Yisa Hashem panav, v'lecha v'yasem shalom.
And welcome to our Facebook friends. I am Shlomo Phillips of allfaith.com. We are coming live on our Facebook feed with Rabbi Ariel Nachman Ben Chaim, with Kelsey Wynn, with Pesach, who apparently has hung up, and with Ancient History, whose name I still don't know. Those who are watching on Skype, by the way, you are welcome to turn your cameras on if you want to. It's up to you. They will show up on Skype, or you're welcome to leave them off. Not sure why we lost Pesach all of a sudden, but we did. All righty. So, Hag Pesach Sameach, everyone. Today is the Purim. I keep saying Pesach. I don't know why. Today is Purim. Yay, Purim. I guess I drank so much that I couldn't remember between Pesach and Purim. That's a takeoff on one of the things. Never mind. Today we're going to be talking, we're continuing our look at the 7 Noahide laws one by one. As we keep saying, these 7 laws actually apply to Jews as well, but they're specifically for the Noahides, for the Gentiles who worship the God of Israel in this format of 7 laws. We've been going through them one by one, and today we're going to be talking about Gilui Arayot, the prohibition of immorality and forbidden sexual relations. Now, I think it probably goes without saying that this is a rather hot topic in this day and age. So I want to start off by saying that, like with all the laws, our purpose is not to condemn anybody or to judge anybody. Our purpose is to share what it means to be a Noahide, things that Noahidim need to understand as far as their role in the service of Hashem following the 7 laws. If you are watching us on Facebook, and if you have any questions, I invite you to post your questions to the Facebook feed. There's about a 12 to 15 second delay between the Facebook feed and between my seeing it and responding, and vice versa. So have a little bit of patience, but whenever we stop for breath, so to speak, I'll be happy to include your topics. I'd like for everyone to sort of take a deep breath on this one, because if there's one of the 7 laws that can get out of hand, this is probably it. We are not living in a halakhically legislated culture in the United States, but we do need to understand these laws. So, Rabbi, if you would be so kind as to begin with this topic.
Oh, sure. Throw me in the fire.
Better than me.
The laws on sexual immorality, they are delineated in the Torah, and they actually, the normal ones that we would think of, but it even goes even farther to adultery, which is it's a commandment in and of itself. But adultery is also part of sexual immorality, because you're stealing the affections of a husband or a wife from their spouse. Forbidden sexual unions, there are some good reasons for them, like incestuous relationships and stuff like that, because they can, and again, we know that there are that it's forbidden, and we can understand what the effects of that are. Why that's actually forbidden by the Torah is, kind of up to debate, but the actual effects of it we can actually see and we can actually experience.
So we know that some of the laws that we have are there for a specific reason. Some of the laws are there for a reason, but we don't necessarily understand what that reason is. And
yes, the difference between a law and a decree.
Mm-hmm.
A law is something that we know, we understand. Thou shalt not murder, period. We know that, okay? We can understand that. That a person should shoo the bird, the mother bird away from the nest to take the eggs. I don't know, maybe not so much. Or why not mix meat in milk? Well, we don't really know, but we can experience, that's a decree. We can experience some of the effects of that. We know that when we mix dairy and meat in a person's diet, that they digest at different rates, and they can actually cause people to have stomach issues and stuff like that. But why is it? We don't know.
Okay, so for these kinds of laws, I think, I mean, I don't really necessarily have halakhic backing for this. Feel free to correct me. But many of our laws were given during the wilderness trek when the Jews were making their way from Egypt into the Promised Land. During that period of time, I've heard estimates as high as like even a couple million or something. There were a lot of people. There weren't just a couple of dozen. And so you've got a huge nation of people crossing the wilderness with very little direct supervision. I mean, they didn't have like police riding around cars and stuff. And so my understanding is that a lot of these laws came about largely to try and secure the peace among those people, because obviously if you have an affair with someone's wife, you're going to have fist fights, you're going to have it's not going to be certain parentage for the children and so on. But it is clear that the Torah does place a lot of stress on these types of laws. Could you maybe speak to why that might be? Yeah, or if I'm correct about that it was mainly for peacekeeping purposes, a lot of it.
No, I don't think it was actually for peacekeeping purposes. A system that does not have a moral code will divert to whatever the majority wants it to be.
True.
When you have a higher moral code that you have to adhere to, then you actually have something.
Okay, so but morality is one of those questions. So why? I mean, I'm obviously not arguing the point, but why is it immoral to have relations with, say, your first cousin or your sister? Why? I mean, obviously Hashem says it's immoral, but that's why I'm trying to sort of get a handle on why a lot of these rules were specified the way they are.
Well, if you now we know that especially in the Egyptian society, I mean, we're talking about these laws being given in the wilderness. Well, we had just come out of Mitzrayim, and we know that in the Egyptian culture, among the upper classes, that to keep their bloodline pure, brothers and sisters married, and close relatives married, and that led to some some very serious genetic problems. Now we can look at that today, and we can see what kind of genetic issues that leads to. Now, obviously, Hashem is a lot smarter than we are, so he already knows what these issues are going to be, and so therefore he made it those kinds of relationships forbidden. And the product of in Judaism, the product of a forbidden union can't even enter into the Bnei Israel until the third generation.
Okay.
So that's how strict that law actually is. We know in the narrative of Sodom and Gomorrah that these kind of sexual perversions and these kind of sexual improprieties were commonplace. Part of the reason that they were actually Sodom and Gomorrah were actually destroyed when we came into the land. Before we crossed into the land, Hashem went through all these laws again and said, "You're not going to do these because these are the things that the people in the land are doing, and that is why I am throwing them out of the land."
Which brings me exactly where I wanted to go with a question. It's amazing our minds are in sync, it seems like. All right, so after Lot and his daughters fled Sodom and Gomorrah, they took part in an incestuous relationship. And the Messiah, well, Lot didn't, but the daughters foisted themselves on him, I suppose. But the Messiah comes through that one of those lineages. I've always thought that was just really fascinating. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, yeah, every leader. The Talmud tells us that you never elect a leader that does not have a flaw. And we see that in David Hamelech, King David, that he was the product of two proselytes, Ruth and Boaz. Ruth was a Ger Zedek, a righteous convert, and Boaz was the son or the grandson of a righteous convert. So basically, nobody could actually, the king couldn't actually hold his position over anybody's head, because they could always come back and say, well, look, you're no better. You're not nothing special. You're nothing better than us, because you come, you came from descended from converts. Your predecessors were pagan worshipers.
But that was a big deal with King David, in fact, right? They were saying he can't be our king because of his lineage, I believe.
Yeah, there was some discussion as to how many generations had it been since Ruth and Boaz, because they can't even actually be considered part of the children of Israel until they have been so many generations. I think Rabbi Wyckoff and I sat down and tried to figure it out, and we did actually figure out that he actually did fulfill the requirement. But there is still some debate about that.
Right. It's sort of ironic. Our most important king would be from that type of relationship.
Well, I think it's rather appropriate, because it always reminds us that the convert can rise to great levels within Judaism. I mean, even one of the sages that Rashi himself quotes from many times is Onkelos, and Onkelos was a convert.
Very true. Very true. So, I had to ask this.
He's trying to make a U-turn to get back to the subject.
Not exactly, not exactly, because I think that's very, very important. Well, for instance, we know that Jews are not allowed to have interreligious marriages. If a person's father is Jewish, but a person's mother is not, then the person still must convert to be accepted as Jewish. Even though prior to Ezra, she would have been Jewish by birth, right?
That's true, yes.
Okay, so that would be a forbidden relationship. I'm not quite sure what the connection is, but I think there should be one there.
It's not actually a forbidden relationship. I mean, there is examples in the Torah where it says that if you take you capture a woman in battle, and you decide to take her for your wife, you have to do this, and this. There's a whole process that goes along with that. Now, God doesn't like it to happen, but he understands that it does happen. In most cases, those spouses will typically convert. Especially the men. Men have a tendency to follow their wives, hence why we have such a prohibition about marrying the daughters of, for Jews to marry outside of their religion as men, because God knows us guys, he knows our thoughts, our thought process. That's all I'm going to say about that. But, we have more of a tendency to follow after the woman's spiritual leanings than the woman actually has following the husband's spiritual leading.
Okay, so if a person is involved in a relationship or a situation in their life that violates some of the Torah's commandments regarding forbidden relationships, can that person still be a Jew? And I mean, if your mother's Jewish, you're Jewish. But can the person still be rabbinically, observantly Jewish without having a completely clean slate regarding these laws?
Well, nobody has a completely clean slate. We have to understand that right off the bat. It's that we are all human and we all have our failings. People are going to do things that they know Hashem doesn't particularly care for us to do. Mm-hmm. Does that mean that they can't be good people? No, it doesn't necessarily mean that they can't be good people. I'm trying to think of an example that I could give you. Can't think of one right offhand. I mean, not one that would be relevant to this group.
Right.
That's the main thing. It's hard to, we're talking about these things and we're talking about them from a Jewish aspect rather than from the Noahide. What does this actually mean to the Noahide?
Which is an important question.
Right. Does it mean that they can't marry somebody who is a worshiper, an idol worshiper? No, there's nothing in the Noahide laws that says that. Can they marry their sister? Well, no, they can't, because the Torah is pretty clear about that. You can't marry your sister. Can you have sexual relations with your relatives? No, you can't do that. So there are for the Noahide, the laws are a bit less stringent than they are for a Jew. A Jew has to be, there's everything that applies to the Noahide applies to the Jew plus.
Right. And of course, a Noahide would want to be aware of the fact that should he or she decide to go ahead and formally convert, if they had married a non-Noahide or a non-Jew, they would not be allowed to do the conversion unless their spouse also chose to convert. So for Noahide, even though something might be allowed, I think that would be something they would want to take into serious consideration.
Yes, especially when they go to convert. I mean, that's usually the first question that I ask anybody who asks, me about conversion is, what are you, crazy? You seriously want to do this? I mean, what's the matter with you?
Right, but let's say
it's so much easier to be a Noahide,
Sure, but let's say that because traditionally, today there's a lot of Noahides, which I think you agree with me might even be in fulfillment of some of the prophecies about the nations coming to the Jews and taking hold of the hem of their garments, saying, "We will go with you, for God is with you," from Zechariah's prophecy. But traditionally, I think that the Noahide was more likely to be a person who was interested in conversion during that conversion process. They would be a Noahide. Like you had said, you can't convert from Christianity or Islam to Judaism directly. You have to be a Noahide first. So
yeah, I mean that's my rule. That's not an overall rule. There are a lot of rabbis that will take people who are coming directly out of one religion and go through the conversion process. I'm the one that, me and some other rabbis actually require the person to live as a Noahide for at least 2 years before we'll even consider taking them through the Ger Zedek program.
Well, yeah, I was aware that you had the 2 years roughly thing is yours, but a person who, let's say, believes in the Trinity, whether it's the Christian, Hindu, or any other Trinity, I don't want to get specific about the religion, but a person who believes that God is more than one, that person would not be acceptable as a convert until the person came to understand the oneness of God. And when the person came to understand the oneness of God and backed off from all those previous beliefs, the person would sort of ipso facto be a Noahide. Right.
Well, yeah.
So
Yeah,
you may,
that's true.
so a
So
rabbi
we would,
might not say you've got to live as a Noahide for a year or 2 years or something, but you do have to be a Noahide in order to convert, because you can't become a Jew if you believe in the Trinity or some of those other teachings, right?
that's true. And you have to remember too that, even we had to go through a period where that 40 years in the wilderness that we had to experience was to break that slave mentality, that connection with Mitzrayim and all the idol worship that went along with it. Took 40 years to do it. So you have to break a slave mentality to whatever religion that you were associated with previous to that, before you can actually be considered for the Ger Zedek. I think it was actually the Ger who lives in the land, as it talks about in the Torah, was actually somebody who actually was a Noahide, because otherwise, why would you want to live there? Because you weren't allowed to have a church or a mosque or some kind of a temple to some idol. It wasn't allowed in Israel.
Right.
I mean, it was a theocratic governed system.
Okay, so to get us back to the Noahide, I guess we're still on the Noahide, but so if a person of another religion becomes a Noahide and wishes to proclaim themselves a Noahide, or even more, were to approach you and say, I would like to convert formally, which is not required to serve God, of course, how important is it that the person's life be upgraded to include whether they're obedient to these laws? How important is that? So, for instance, a polygamist, could a polygamist be a Noahide? Well, not necessarily polygamist, that's not specified. Could a person who married their sister consider themselves to be a Noahide? Or would they have to leave their sister in order to be accepted, their wife's sister, in order to be accepted as a Noahide? How are those lines drawn?
That is that's a very good question.
That's why I asked.
I would think that that you have to put it away. You have to get out of that thinking and that whole mishigash. Otherwise, that the tendency to slip back into it is going to be very easy.
Right.
You can be, you can proclaim yourself to be a Noahide, but I mean, how hypocritical is it of you if you're saying, well, I'm a Noahide, but I still go with my wife to whatever service, for her special holiday for her faith, for her religion.
Right.
It's and that's the perception. Well, obviously you can't be, because you're walking in. It's like the same thing as a Jew walking into a restaurant that serves primarily pork. He may not be doing it, but the perception is that people are going to look at it and say, well, obviously he can't be really a Jew because he's in this restaurant that serves primarily pork.
Right. Okay. So if a person came to you and wanted to convert, you said that one of the first things that you ask them is their marital status. And if the marital status is not halakhically acceptable, then the person would not be accepted as a convert, correct?
Actually, I don't even ask.
Oh, you don't?
No. My position is they will figure it out through the process. That's why our process is rather extensive.
Huh.
It's not like going to some rabbis and in 30 days you can become a Jew. No. It takes a lot longer for me, because I mean, our dropout rate is 80%. And there's a reason for that, because people get a real feel and an understanding for what it actually means to be a Jew, and about 80% of them will say, this is not where I want to go. It's better for me to live as a Noahide than to, pursue becoming a Jew.
Right.
Which is better. I mean, it's just better for them. It's God will accept them just as easily, being a Noahide, as if they, rather than them coming to him as a Jew who isn't actually, keeping the laws.
Right. Interesting. I had a rabbi one time tell me that one of the reasons why it's so difficult to become a Jew is because we already have so many bad Jews, we don't need any more. And that we want to make sure that the new Jews are going to be good Jews. That's sort of what you're saying, I think.
I think they come to it on their own conclusion. The reason that I believe that it's so hard to become a Jew is because, well, it's not that we have too many bad Jews, because every Jew has the potential to be a good Jew.
Sure.
So I don't think that's a rational explanation. I think it's that the majority of the world was not intended to be Jews, and we actually have that from the scriptures that tell us. I mean, even in the times of the Mashiach, that the Noahide will actually have their own gate into the temple, along with the other gates, that the 13 gates, one for each tribe, and the one for the person who doesn't know their tribe, and then a gate for the nations and the Noahides.
Right. Very good. Want to welcome Assemblyman Wayne Jones. Hi, Wayne. Glad you were able to make it.
I'm glad to be back.
Glad you're back. Wayne is a good Noahide friend from Missouri. Okay, so I don't think we necessarily need to go down and make a list of the forbidden things. It's right there in the Torah for anyone to read. Can you maybe, I know this one touches a little bit too much into Kabbalah, which we don't want to do, but can you explain to us why it is that sexual immorality is so serious for a Jew? Is that a fair question?
Well, for everyone in general, because sexual immorality is based, whatever the product is that's going to come out of any kind of a union or system or whatever you want to call it, is going to be based on what the inputs are. And if the inputs are negative, the output cannot be a positive.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go into any kind of a relationship without the proper energy attached to it, whatever comes out of that relationship is always going to be detrimental. Either detrimental to you, detrimental to the other person, or detrimental to other people around you.
Okay. I know that the Torah uses the term mamzer for those who are born with uncertain parentage. There's a connection there.
A mamzer is a person who is the product of a forbidden union.
Okay. So that would be a person who is born from one of these forbidden unions that we're talking about. That's how you would refer to the child of such a union?
Yes.
And is that
a mamzer can only marry a mamzer until the third generation. and then they will be, they're no longer considered mamzerim.
Okay, interesting. So you would have to explain to the child the relationship by which the child was born, and then the child would have to pass it to their children and to their children. And they would tell their kids, you're now free of that?
I think that actually would be well, you got to remember that these are laws that are incumbent on Israel, that, at that point, a mamzer can only marry a mamzer. That's a Jewish law. That's not a universal one.
No, for sure.
If we go into the Noahide world, then a mamzer, or the product of a forbidden union, is not restricted to only marrying the product of another forbidden union. They're allowed to marry whoever it is that they decide to marry.
Right, but then their marriages, or the Gentile marriage in general, is it recognized as a legitimate marriage by the rabbinic authorities? I'm asking that because I know that one of the first things that most converts do after conversion is they marry under a canopy.
Okay, I'm not really sure what you're trying to get to. So
I think what I'm asking is, let's see, for a marriage to be recognized as a marriage, is it required that it be done halakhically by Jewish people? And if so, like in Israel, only Orthodox are allowed to oversee marriages. So if so, then if a Gentile is married and then becomes a Noahide and then becomes a Jew through conversion, is their marriage recognized under Jewish law as a real marriage? Or do you have any knowledge about that?
No, they would. If both partners convert, then they do have another wedding ceremony. They actually are. You're right. They are actually married under a chuppah, so that their marriage is actually sanctified as a Jewish marriage before God.
Okay, so that's why I'm wondering, if a Noahide gets married, then that marriage would not be under rabbinic auspices. And so some of the requirements that are incumbent upon Jews would not be incumbent upon that Noahide for that reason.
Right, exactly.
Okay. Just wanted to sort of clarify that point. All righty, good.
Yeah, I think the laws for the Noahides are more for the individual. If you look at Jewish laws, they are, basically it's incumbent on the entire nation as a whole. Where, as opposed to the Noahide, where it's an individual choice. And those laws that are incumbent on the Noahide is only incumbent on that Noahide who actually accepts that path.
Good point. Okay.
That doesn't mean a Noahide can go out and marry a horse or anything.
Right. Well, yeah, you would have certain other violations there. Sylvia, by the way, says amen, so thank you for that, Sylvia. Yeah, this is part of the so if you look at the rabbinic requirements for marriage, in the Torah, you don't see a whole lot of specific rules. This is how you do it. This is how you get married in the Torah itself or in the Tanakh. Correct?
That's true, yes.
Okay, so how does a Jew determine a halakhically appropriate marriage? Is this coming from the Talmud or from your local minhag, or how is that determined? What makes
Well,
it?
it actually is comprised of, okay, first of all, the two that are going to be married have to be they have to be Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be a contract between them. Okay, and we've seen this time and time again in our patriarchs and matriarchs that there was an eshrun, a ketuvah, and which, in those days they were actually done before the marriage. Nowadays they're usually done as part of the wedding ceremony, but back in the day when the man and the woman became engaged, they would draw up a ketuvah, which actually it was a marriage contract saying that the marriage would happen within a certain period of time. If the man actually backed out of it, there was a monetary penalty that went with it and stuff like that. It was an actual business contract.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. If people who are on Facebook, by the way, if you have any questions, as I said, feel free to post your questions on here too. We're definitely interested in what you're wondering about.
Yeah. So in Judaism, I mean, there isn't a lot of rules. There's a lot of traditions, but there are only a few rules dealing with the actual marriage of two Jews. Most of the rest of it is all minhag. For the Noahide, it's basically, you're not marrying into a situation that is that God considers to be inappropriate, for lack of a better term.
Okay. All right. So how would a Noahide determine which laws are applicable to him or her and which are not?
By going to the Torah and seeing about, like I was talking about earlier, as Moshe was getting ready to bring the people in, God had told him to tell the people that this is why these nations are being thrown out of the land. And those things that are dealing with sexual impropriety and stuff like that are listed there,
mm-hmm.
That's what you don't do. It's very simple. God's actually listed them out for you.
So that would be an important place for the Noahides to go.
Yeah, because, I mean, if God is kicking them out for doing that, then how is the Noahide actually going to be allowed to do it? That's a contradiction in terms.
Good point.
Or a contradiction in thoughts. So if it's forbidden for the Amorite, the Jebusite, the Hittite, the Evite, and all the other ites, then it must be forbidden for the Goyim, for the nations, the Tevel.
Mm-hmm. All right, so if you look at those long lists like in Leviticus, those would probably only apply to the Gentiles. And so if a Noahide, to the Jews rather. So if a Noahide saw those rules, he or she would say, I need to find out what specifically was said to the Amorites and the Amalekites and so on. Or would all of those laws... See, this is what I think confuses a lot of Noahides. Because we keep telling them that they're not under the law, and yet to discuss these things, we keep going to the Torah and saying, well, the Torah says...
Right. Yeah, but like I said, it's very simple, because we have one section in the Torah that talks about, this is why I'm throwing these people out of the land.
Okay, so that section is what they want to study.
They pass their children through the fire to Molech. They worship the Baal. They set up Asherim trees, prostration stones, pillars for idol worship, and so on and so forth. They engaged in sexual impropriety. They were incestuous relationships and all bestiality and all those other things. And so if God said that I'm throwing the people out of the land for these reasons, it becomes very easy for the Noahide to say, well, I better not do that, because obviously God doesn't want anybody doing it, because he's actually going to destroy some of these people for doing it.
Excellent point. Excellent point. That's a real good point. I have never heard anyone draw that particular focus to those verses as a way that Noahide could figure that out. That's very good.
And that's why you bring me on.
And that's why I bring you on, because you're the Rebbe. You know all this stuff. All righty. Does anyone have any questions for the rabbi? Again, like a lot of these, I think that the rules are pretty much clear what we can and can't do. It's really a question of choosing to follow them.
Yeah, I mean, there are people will find all kinds of ways to justify their actions, but when it comes down to it, God will make it very clear, and has made it very clear, what is allowed and what is not allowed for the Jew and for the Noahide, and for the rest of the nations in general. I mean, you can justify anything you want in your head, but when it comes right down to it, you have to stick with, what did God say? What did God actually say about that?
Very good. Very good. So I often like to think of all of these things really as going back to the level of one's consciousness. That, like Hillel said, that which you find to be distasteful, don't do to someone else. That so much of these things are the consciousness. I think people have a natural conscience to know right from wrong. And if a person knows a thing is wrong, then they shouldn't do that thing. And in this area in particular, I think people know. I think you sense, having relations with an animal, or, raping or something, these things just aren't right. People know that.
Yeah, you would think so. In today's society, though, I mean, where we have divorced God so much from the equation, and almost elevated science to a level of idolatry.
Right.
And we look to science for all the answers to everything. And geez, I forgot where I was going. I completely derailed my whole train of thought here.
I'm good at that.
No, that without some kind of guiding moral compass, something that's over and above, what man has come up with, or what man has come to understand. And actually, Rabbi Prager actually wrote a very good book called The 9 Questions People Ask About Judaism. Mm-hmm. Amazing book, because it talks all about, morality and atheism and stuff like that, and how, when you decide that man has the best idea, that there is no overriding moral compass to guide you by, then basically what you end up with is, you don't end up with theology, you end up with a philosophy. It's a big difference between the two. You can justify philosophy. Mm-hmm. You can come up with any number of arguments to justify what you're doing, whether for good or for bad. That doesn't give you an overriding moral compass. You have to have something above that, above what man says. Otherwise, like I said, you become a reed in the wind. You bend to whatever direction the wind is blowing. And we have seen that. In our own times, how the winds of people's thinking and emotions have swayed what was maybe 20 years ago was not acceptable is now thought as, well, yeah, maybe it is acceptable.
Right. Absolutely.
And then in another 20, 30 years, it may not be acceptable again. So where does that leave you? It leaves you floating out in the middle of an ocean with no compass and no paddle and no way to know where you're at or how to get anywhere.
Good point. Good point. And that's one of the reasons why. So Judaism has always stressed the importance of self-control, of controlling yourself, controlling your emotions, controlling what you do. This Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Hara duality, it's up to us to control it. It's not that someone, external source, can come and control it for us. We have to choose the path. We have to walk it. And we have to exercise the self-control to do it.
We have to be responsible for our own actions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's, you cannot put off what you can't just ignore the responsibility for your own actions and say, well, it's something else's fault.
Right.
Or I don't have to worry about that because, I've been, in my religion, it's told me if I just say this or I say that, then, everything is hunky-dory. No, it doesn't work like that. Not in God's world, not in anybody's world.
Right.
That there are consequences to everything that you do. Everything that you do, you will be judged for.
So Hashem says, choose life, that you and your descendants may live.
Exactly.
And life is life affirming, and that includes being respectful, affirming the importance of the spark of life, that it passes generation to generation in appropriate ways. That's all part of choosing life, choosing the high.
It's respect for where life comes from. Because, we know that certain aspects are of Hashem's attributes are in the men. Certain aspects of Hashem are in the women. Together, they make up all the aspects of Hashem, and through Hashem, life comes into this world. And if any of those aspects are polluted, then what is going to result from that is going to be a pollution.
Right. Absolutely. So if we look at the 7 laws, they're leading us, like we said before, there is not actually a set order for these, but the order that we're using here, but you've got Avodah Zarah, which is the requirement to worship Hashem properly, to avoid idolatry, to avoid false worship and that type thing. You set your mind on worshiping Hashem according to his rules. When you do that, that takes you to Birchat Hashem, the prohibition against blasphemy and cursing God's name. You want to bless the God that you're worshiping. You want to lift him up. You want to honor him. And the prohibition against murder, Sifechat Damim, is the prohibition against taking that which is not yours, which is life. What more than anything is not yours to take away than life. And then you can't take away other items. So we talked about Gizel, the prohibition of robbery and theft. And now we're talking about our own bodies, that we can't take away from our own bodies and do those things which are not acceptable. So all of these roll in together in a way that leads people Godward. Next week we're going to be talking, Bezrat Hashem, about the Min HaChai, the prohibition against animal cruelty. And then we have the 7th one, which is the commandment to establish courts to enforce the other 7 laws, or the other 6 laws. So the code itself, the purpose of it is to lift people up to a higher level of consciousness, to a godlike, to a Godward level of consciousness, so that we will be in a position to more fully and completely serve Hashem and to bless the world, which is the thing that the Jews are required to do and the Noahadim are required to help us with, which is to bless the world.
Yeah, and I mean, the essence of it all for the Jew and for the Noahide is basically love God. And if you love God, then what does God want from me? Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's easy to say, well, I have to love God, but what does that actually mean? How do I do that? And that's a question that we are constantly asking ourselves. Mm-hmm. How do I do that? And therefore, we have the Torah, and from the Torah we get the Talmud, we get the Shulchan Aruch, and so on and so forth. For the Noahide, they're asking the question, well, what does it mean to love God? Well, do this and do this and do this and do this. Mm-hmm. It's as simple as that. If you do those things, if you love God, you will do those things because God has asked you to do them. Not because there's anything attached to it. It's because God asked me to do it, so, hey, I'm going to do it because I love God.
Right. And part of that service is Hashem says that he made the Jews to be a nation, a kingdom of priests, and the purpose was to bless the world. Genesis 12:3 says that God will bless those who bless Israel, and through Israel the world will be blessed. And when the world is blessing Hashem, then Hashem blesses the world, and we find ourselves in the Olam Haba, the world to come, which is a world full of blessing, I would think.
Yeah, and that's one of the, again, and I've stressed this many, many times. It goes for the Noahide as well as it goes for the Jew. That God never acts until we act first. That we actually have to do something. We have to invest something of ourselves so that we can merit God to come and intervene or help us or whatever it is that we're asking. But if you notice throughout the Torah, God has never acted unless we acted first and we merited him to act. Mm-hmm.
And you've got that idea that there's never a thou shalt not without a thou shalt. There's always a flip side. There's for everything we do, there's always a blessing bestowed. And so if we say no to our base urges, in the case of this particular topic, if we resist the desire that we may have to go out and violate these types of prohibitions, then that resistance itself will result in a blessing from Hashem for our efforts. Because we can't, as the saying goes, you can't outgive God. So when we obey God, then God will always bless our efforts. And that helps us, usually in the short term, but always in the long term. It helps us draw closer and closer to Hashem.
That's true.
So, do we have any questions on Facebook? Anybody? I'm not seeing any Facebook questions at all. Andrea says, here we go. Andrea said, okay, so here, really, this is actually a really good question for today. Okay. So Andrea Loza asked, how do we become a Noahide? And do we have to be a Noahide before converting to Judaism? Rabbi. So how does a person become a Noahide?
A person becomes a Noahide strictly by adhering to the 7 Noahide laws and rejecting all the others.
Okay, does a person have to have approval by some board, some group of rabbis or some Noahide board to be able to say, I am a Noahide?
No.
Okay, so if a person wants to become a Jew,
they'll be known by what they do.
Right, so if a person wants to become a Jew, you have to go through a Beit Din. But to become
right.
a Noahide, you simply obey.
Exactly, yes.
Right. We actually, Andrea, the early part of this conversation, we discussed whether a person has to be a Noahide before converting. Rabbi A, I should let him speak for himself, but people who convert through him are required to live as Noahides for a year or two before converting. But in order to convert in any system of Judaism, a person would have to come to a Noahide mindset where they would reject all other gods, all other religions, all other paths, and would be devoting themselves strictly to Hashem. Whether that person calls themselves a Noahide or not, that is essentially what they are before they're able to convert. And like Rabbi said,
even if they don't even know, even if they don't know it themselves,
yeah, and a lot
they've
of people
they've already rejected idolatry.
right. And so it's the Noahide way isn't actually something that is like formalized, even though there are a few groups now claiming to be formalized Noahide groups. It's not something that's formalized. It is a statement that I accept as binding upon me, not my neighbor, but me, these 7 Noahide laws, and I'm going to worship the God of Israel. I'm going to stand with the Jewish people, and I'm going to serve Hashem in that way. A person who honestly can say that and who is only looking to Hashem for their redemption and whatnot, that person is a Noahide, whether they know the term or not. Correct, Rabbi?
Those people, those are the laws that God gave to all mankind. Those are the laws that preceded Judaism. They're older than Judaism itself.
Mm-hmm.
They predate Judaism by a long time. It isn't until Noah, that's 10 generations after Adam, or actually Abraham, 20 generations after Adam, 10 generations after Noah, that these laws have been around.
Yeah, we also want to remember, too, that even though we refer to them as the Noahide laws because they were re-given to Noah, these are actually the original universal laws revealed to Adam and before Adam. These are simply the 7 universal laws that apply to all life in God's creation.
The reason why they're called the Noahide laws is because and you'll notice this every time God makes a covenant with a people, and they say it's a new covenant. It's not actually a new covenant. It's an expansion on the original one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so every time God says, I'm going to make a covenant with you to the people, to the children of Israel as they're doing whatever they're doing, it's not a new covenant. It's not different. It's just expanding on the original covenant. So when we talk about the Noahide covenant, the Noahide laws, it's the covenant that God made with man after the flood, when Noah was given permission to eat animal flesh, because it was an expansion on the original covenant, which was all the herbs and the fruits and vegetables and stuff like that was for man to eat. And the covenant was expanded under Noah to say, well, you have that, but now we're going to open it up and include meat,
Mm-hmm.
animal flesh, which we're going to talk about next week, right?
Right.
There you go. How's that for a connection?
That's very good.
Segued right into that thing. I mean, just like sliding into second.
Andrew, also on the Facebook screen, I am posting it's called Understanding the 7 Laws One by One. That's this series. If you click that link, you can go back and listen to all the series that we've done on this topic. We're looking at them one by one. And there's also other things on my website that you might find interesting also. But yeah, that's the way I look at it too, is if Judaism says that there's only one God and that God created everything. All right, so if that's true, which it is, then that one God is the parent, capital P, of all humanity, of all things, of all flesh. Being a Noahide really is simply worshiping that one initial original soul parent. If you do that as the parent says, you're a Noahide, unless you're a Jew. In which case you have the not another covenant, as Rabbi was saying. You have the expanded covenant for the Jewish people, so the Jews can work as a kingdom of priests and a holy nation to help the rest of the world be blessed. Any other thoughts? Thank you, Paolo. Paolo says thank you. Any other questions? We're coming up on the end of our broadcast here. If you haven't yet done it, I strongly support, encourage, advise you to go to YouTube and look up 7 Beggars on YouTube. Do a search on 7 Beggars. You will find the archived services and classes of Rabbi Ariel Nachman ben Chaim, who is my Rebbe and the rabbi of the House of 7 Beggars, and who is graciously willing to be here to help us in these classes. He does 2 Torah services a week on Friday night and Saturday morning, and then he also does 2 classes a week during the weekdays. He just completed the 2 Purim readings of the Megillah, and they're wonderful. Both of them are really good. So I encourage you to check out Rabbi Ariel Nachman ben Chaim in the House of 7 Beggars.
And if you think this one was good, wait till next year. I'm going to blow everybody's socks off next year.
Ooh, I'm excited. What are you going to give us a hint?
Nope.
I am excited. Looking forward to that then.
I mean, you can actually go on the 7 Beggars website. You can see some of the Purim spiels that we have done in the past. You know, I'm a frustrated entertainer at heart, so I love to do things that are kind of out of the ordinary and to get people's attention. And I've got a big one planned.
I got to tell you, by the way, last night when Zeta kept mouthing the words, and you kept giving him those dirty looks, telling him to be quiet and behave himself. I love that. Ahuva and I were just sitting here just cracking up. It was so good.
Well, I learned that one from my kids, because that's every parent does that with their kids, right?
But I did have a question. I did have a question about that though. Zeta is a rabbi in his own right, correct?
The backstory is, and we have to, Halakha tells us that we have to. Okay, yes, Zeta is a puppet. He is not real. I am actually making him do whatever he does.
No.
His thoughts are my thoughts. So I'm sorry. What was the question again?
His backstory, though, isn't his backstory that he's a Rebbe? He's a rabbi?
His backstory is that he is a rabbi and he is a Holocaust survivor.
Yeah, so you're telling a Holocaust survivor. I thought that was sort of interesting. He goes between being your child and being your compatriot. Your mentor, sometimes, Ahuva said.
Actually, yes. Zeta is a composite of a number of rabbis that I have known in my life. He represents what I would like to be. Let's put it that way.
Well,
he's my higher aspiration.
Speaking just for me, and I think you know me good enough to know that I'm not the kind of person that blows hot air at people's skirts, so to speak. I think you're an awesome rabbi. And I had somebody the other day PM me and said that he's been trying to get answers to things, and that you're like one of the few people that he can actually ask and get a straight answer from. I totally applaud you as a rabbi. I think you're absolutely awesome.
Well, I do my best. I mean, like I said, I've told many people many times, it's on the website too, that everything that I have, everything that I do is on loan from God. He can take that back whenever he wants to. It's not mine, it's his. And I am just fortunate to be able to be that conduit in this corporal world for that.
Amen. All righty. Well, if there's no more questions, we're going to let the rabbi go.
Yes, we have mincha and probably plenty of drinking to do because it is Purim.
That is very true.
Yeah, of course, I'm not going to be drinking any meat or anything that's going to blow up in my face or anything. But
that was so funny. Well, you should have seen the meat all over the floor when I did that. I think I didn't. I think I racked it a little bit too quickly last time. I should have left it in the bottles longer.
Yeah, so anybody, if you're listening to this and you want to know what we're talking about, go to Shlomo Phillips' page, and there is a video of it on there. It's hysterical. I almost fell out of my chair watching it last night. I think it was actually funnier than what Zeta was doing, to tell you the truth.
Thank you, Rab. I appreciate that.
Okay, well, a hug from Samak to everybody.
You too. Thank you very much. If anyone would like to talk, I can hang out here a few more minutes. And if anyone doesn't want to talk, then I will be gone as well.
Oh, I'll talk.
Okay.
I want to thank Rabbi for his time.
He's already gone, but I'm sure he appreciates that.
You want to see my tomato plants?
Yeah. Can you put them on the screen for us?
Okay. Give me 1 second.
All righty. For those of you who may not know, Wayne and I are actually the two that started this Holy Hill Noahide community. Wayne is an alderman in Mountain Grove. Wayne and I are actually the two that started this Holy Hill Noahide community. I'm getting a Wayne is an alderman in Mountain Grove. Wayne I do have 2 feet to go. That started this Holy Hill Noahide community. I'm getting a Wayne is an alderman there. How did I do that? I do have 2 feet to go. Oh, I see. Hang on, folks. I have 2 feeds going at one time. Let's just stop there. All right, let's see here. Okay, that should do it. I was trying to make the picture on Facebook larger so we could see Wayne's picture, and I think I can't do it the way I was trying to do that. But Wayne can show us on Skype when he gets back.
Here's a few of the tomato plants I got going.
Right.
Can you see them?
Hang on a second, Wayne. I'm trying to get rid of the chat screen so we'll see more of you. Where's the chat screen? There it is. All right. He's the last one here. We can see them not real good. They're sort of being whitewashed out. But it does look like you're going to have some nice tomatoes, who said.
What makes you close the blind? Now?
Make Torah learning your daily priority and grow your. Put it on your schedule and watch all day on Roku, Amazon Fire, and YouTube. Make every minute count. You're watching the Torah Learning Channel at TorahLearningChannel.com. Did the rabbis invent the oral law? That's what we're discussing today. Sit tight. We will be right back. Welcome to Tanakh Talk. I am your host, William Hall, broadcasting live out of Kingsland, Texas, USA. Another episode of Rabbi Tobias Singer's Let's Get Biblical. We already discussed what the topic's going to be. It'll be fun. Rabbi, welcome back to the show. Pleasure having you here as always. And I have an edit to do on my screencast. I'm always so tempting. It's always so tempting at the very end of the show to when we do the closing music, because the music is the same. Just to freak everybody out and say, welcome to Tanakh Talk. I'm going to do it one of these days, just see if anybody's like awake, paying attention. Good to see you, Rabbi. Good to see all you folks out there. Thank you for joining us this morning. Yeah, it's going to be a really cool. This is one of those reoccurring. It's not just a claim; it's actually an aggravation. I think with most folks, to the point where it's the people who are coming out of Christianity. They're the ones that I hear this from the most, and this may not be the case across the board, but this is where I hear it the most about the rabbis inventing the oral law. But it's so much of a strife that and them knowing when they come out of Christianity, they realize that the church is anti-Semitic and anti this and that, whatever. But this thing is so deep.